Hi everyone, it's Shauna with New to the Country Life, and today I'm going to show you how to pour these two-part chest mold, and I'm gonna show you a little mini checker mold that I made myself, and we'll pour it so that we make a matching set to go along with this board. In one technique, we're going to use mica powders for the pieces on this, and then the second half of the video we're going to pour a second set of chest pieces, and we're going to do a glitter technique, and we're going to match this swirly pattern in one side of the pieces. So let's get started. I use KS resin, and I'll put a link to it and a discount code in the description. The one I use is the Liquid Art Alter UV, and we're going to go ahead and mix up 8 ounces because we have a lot to do today. And this has about a 45-minute work time for me. Don't pour more than you can use in that time because it'll just be a waste. If you aren't fast enough to get it done, it's better to mix like maybe 2 ounces at a time or something like that. What I'm doing is getting my gloves on because I forgot to do that. And resin makes my hands break out, so I have to wear gloves. You should also probably wear a ventilator when you work with resin. This is low VOC. I don't wear one, but it's recommended to wear one. So that was the resin that we put in to start with, and now we're going to add the hardener. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio, so we're adding 4 ounces of hardener to 4 ounces of the resin. When you mix resin, you want to make sure that you mix it until it's completely clear. The slower that you mix it, the less amount of bubbles that you'll have. I'm not too concerned about bubbles today because in the mold that we're doing, it's open face, and so I can get the bubbles out using I use a propane blowtorch, or I use a little butane lighter, one or the other. It just depends on what's quickest to grab for me. When you're mixing resin, be sure to get around all the edges, the corners of the bottom. I stir it where I try to not fold it so much, because just like in baking, when you fold something in, if you're doing this motion, you're folding air into it. So I try to keep my stick in there. Some people use silicone sticks instead of wood sticks because they say the wood has air in it naturally because it's not sealed, and that releases micro bubbles into your resin as well. So it's usually recommended about 3 minutes of stirring. Read your instructions for the resin that you're using. I say mix it until it's completely clear and you can't see any trails through it, because you could mix it for 3 minutes but then swipe the side and you see a trail through there. If you can see different color within your resin, it is not mixed even if you've went 3 minutes. So make sure that as you're stirring it, you see no it'll just look like a little bit of a different shade of clear, if that makes sense, but you shouldn't be able to see that. It should just be a completely clear concoction. I wipe my stick off on the sides occasionally to make sure that I'm getting all of that mixed in there as well. You don't want to have like hardener or resin stuck to your stick and not completely mixed in your mix. And of course, you're always welcome to fast forward through mixing, but I cover it in every video because I do them as I go, and I want you to all understand. So as I'm doing this, I can see that there's nothing down in the bowl. I don't know if you can see that. It's all clear. There are bubbles, but there's no trails of anything in there. It's completely clear. So that's ready to go. These little ones take per tray right at 40 milliliters to fill. So what I'm going to do is use 2 cups, and I'm going to put just some resin in there. And I'm just going to be guessing because we're also going to use it for the checker mold so that we have matching pieces. And I can always mix up more if I need. I'm going to set the rest of that aside, and we're going to work with these 2 cups. So the color of this board was the spring green and the sapphire blue. So we're going to make pieces to match that. And they're just going to be solid mica powder. I'm not going to do any special techniques or anything with it other than just mixing the mica powder in. So to put it in, a little bit goes a long way. That's about all I'm going to put in. These powders are from Arteza. You can buy them in a kit from them, and they do sizzle, which is nice. That's 4 payments with no interest. In case you don't know what that is, you can look that up. And then we're just gonna mix this in gently. You don't want to go at it too aggressive because you don't want the air in there, but also that powder will fly back up because it's extremely, I don't know how to say it. It creates a cloud if you just go right into it, and it'll come back up in your face. You really don't want to be breathing that. Mix it thoroughly because you will get little clumps of it in there. And for me, I like using these clear cups when I can because you can see through them. So that's a nice match for that color. This is for that color. So I'm going to set that back here, and we'll start with this blue. When you fill these molds, you'll want to underfill them, if anything. Try to get them flat, but you don't want to overfill them. And I'll show you why when I'm showing you how to glue some pieces together here in a minute. So what I do is I just start filling, and it takes very little. And if it starts to overflow, I try to make sure I get that right away because you don't want it filling up the edges of the mold because it gets messy. I use my little rounded tool, and I like that because you can touch the mold and it doesn't scratch your mold. But as you're going, make sure, like I said, you're not overfilling it because it creates a bubble on the back, and that's the last thing you want to have because the pieces won't glue together properly that way. Sorry, I'm seeing a little something in my mold and I don't want it in there. And we just go along and we fill in each piece. And as it settles and the bubbles start to pop, you may have to come back and add a little tiny more, but that's easy to do. It's easier to fill it a little more than it is to try to take it out of there. These are fairly new molds. They've only been poured a couple times. You're going to see my other molds for the next set that's been poured a lot. So in this king piece, it has a little, I'll show you on this one, it has a little piece where there's a cross at the top here. I always find that you kind of need to pull that in to it from the rest of the mold, and it doesn't matter if it overflows that area a little bit. That's fairly easy to clean up afterwards. Even though this takes just a little bit of resin, these actually take quite a bit of time to pour because you're working in such a small area. And what we're doing is, normally when you buy these, you get one set, and I like to pour full sets when I do it. So I have like 8 sets of these molds. That way I can just go along and get them poured. And if you do this right, you won't have to sand on them or anything. They'll come out really nice. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to fill in the rest of this, and I'll pop the video back on when I get the set poured and we start to do the checkers, and that way you don't have to sit and just watch this part. Just using the popsicle stick right now to kind of fill that. Clean up edges if I drip it or whatever. Okay, so we've got this side poured. I'm going to do the torch again and get rid of bubbles. Very quickly, don't burn your mold. And I'll check that again in about 10 minutes. If they happen to need to go over one more time because more bubbles came to the surface, that's okay. I'm just going to move some stuff out of the way here. And we're going to move these up here. And then we have our second set of molds. These are a lot older, and I try to take that off if possible, but if it's wanting to stick to the mold, I just leave it. It's not going to hurt your pieces. I made sure it's not down in my pieces, the actual glitter or anything. But you don't want to pull on it if it's stuck, because it's going to tear your molds. So these ones have been used quite a bit more. And what I do is I try to keep them together for one color, so that if glitter happens to get from here into the mold, at least it looks the same. So we're going to pour those in just a second. This is my mini checker mold I made myself. Nobody has a mini checker mold, and I wanted the pieces to be able to fit on the 7-inch board. So I made this mold myself. Sorry, you can't get it anywhere. It's got 24 pieces in it. I'm going to pour 12 of them in this blue and 12 in the green, and then that way when I go to sell that, it's a combo set. It has both checker and chest pieces come with it that way. So we're just going to fill this up. And I don't fill them to the top, because when I made the mold, the pieces are super thick and they don't need to be as thick as they are. So I'm pouring them all approximately the same size so they look good when they come out, but I'm not filling them to the top of the mold. That's not necessary. I'm just trying to make sure that they're approximately the same. And if I pour too much in there, I can always use sandpaper and just sand it off. And like I said, I'm doing 12 of each, so we have the right amount of pieces. Hopefully I have just enough resin, we'll see. Just need 2 more pieces here. Yay, looks like we're gonna make it. Hopefully have enough green. If not, we'll just mix a little bit more. Now these molds, I keep my room that I work in almost 80 degrees. So these will be ready to take out tonight. They need to set for most of the day. Some people like to leave them longer than that, like 24 hours. But I find if I take them out when they're a little bit pliable, I have less problems with them sticking to the molds. And we did some research and found out that resin shrinks. And so when you have a mold that is, not gonna have quite enough. When you have a mold that has fine detail in it, and your resin shrinks around that fine detail, that's when it takes hold of the mold and you have trouble getting the mold to release. So I find if I wait until they're not sticky, but they're not yet hard, then that's the best time to get them out for me. I have the least amount of trouble with them sticking to the mold that way. And we're just mixing up a little bit more just so I can get these last 4 checkers poured. I have some of these done. I can show you at the end of the video so you can see how cute and little they are. But they fit perfect on these boards. Okay, so we're going to set that mold aside and just let it do its thing. I see some bubbles coming up, so we're just going to quickly hit it with the torch. Silicone is usually good to about 400 degrees or so, sometimes even higher than that. But if you burn it with fire directly on it, it's not healthy. It's not meant for direct flame. It can handle like an oven better, but it does not handle direct flame very good. Okay, so we've done the pieces to match this board, and now we're going to do some pieces to match this one. So for the first side, I'm going to do straight magenta glitter. This is Pink Voltage from Poly Glitter, and I'm just going to pour half of it in that color, and then the other half we're going to do an alcohol ink technique to make the pieces match the swirls in the board. So we're going to put in approximately what we need here, mix in our glitter, and get this first side poured. And I'm pouring it pretty heavy because I want that glitter to be all through the piece, like it is through the board. So I'm adding quite a bit of glitter to it. I'll show you the consistency when it's mixed in so you can see. So it's like this. It's kind of goopy, and it's been sitting for a little while. So it's starting to set up. And this makes it where the glitter stays suspended better in the resin when you pour it. Giving it a little bit of time to thicken up seems to help. So I'll pour a couple, and then we'll fast forward to when I got it done and we start the other technique. You can see by letting it sit, it's thicker and a little bit harder to work with. I wouldn't say necessarily harder, but it's definitely thicker, so it's a little different to work with than when you very first mix it. And that's how I like to do the glitter anyway, because then you have a little more of where stuff stays suspended in it better. Now you see why my molds look this way. Okay, I'm going to pause it and we'll be right back. Okay, so we've got that filled up, and I have a little extra. I keep these napkin ring holder molds handy. When I have extra, I just put it in there, and that way when they're completely done, they're just different colors and interesting. So I just keep topping them off. It's kind of a fun way to get different looks. Resin is expensive, so my feeling is it all needs to get used in one way or another, so that you reclaim your, whether you're making it for you or to sell, you're reclaiming your investment by using it all that way. Because as you can see, it adds up, and then, you know, if you're able to sell a set of napkin ring holders for $10, then you don't have all that wasted resin that way. I have a little bit of this green from the chest set, so we're just going to top it off with that. And this is thick enough now, it's not going to blend together. It will layer. But this, having extra molds around, whether they're little jewelry molds or trinket molds, there's ashtray molds, whatever, just keeping them handy like that for extra resin. And even if you don't have enough left to completely fill it, do what I'm doing and just layer them, and it gives you some cool products, cool way to save your extra resin. I'll show you one that's done so you can see what I'm talking about. That's one that I did, so it's just different layers, and they look really cool. So we'll set that aside, and we're going to use the fire to get rid of the bubbles on these, and then we're going to do that other technique with the alcohol ink. Okay, so for the other pieces, I want them to have this same effect that this has. And what that is it was clear. And then I put pink alcohol ink using, oh, excuse me. I used raspberry, and this is Tim Holtz. And I used white. And I'm going to show you how to do that so that our pieces match perfectly to the board. So we're going to start by filling these with clear. I'll pour a couple again, and then I'll pause it, and we'll come back when they're all full. And then we'll go through the technique. Okay, so we're back, and we've got those all poured. And I'm going to just quickly take off bubbles. This is my propane torch, because my butane torch just ran out of ink, or out of butane. Okay, so the first thing we do is we take the colored alcohol ink. So you're going to need a color, and you're going to need white. The white always has to be done with this, because that's what causes the alcohol ink to swirl in and really pop. And it's heavier, so it causes it to like drop in. So we're going to go and we're going to put one drop right in the middle of each of these smaller pieces, and you'll see it start to spread out. And if you've gotten a lot on the sides, you'll see it go out of the mold. It's not a big deal. So you notice for the king and queen, I put two, one in the top and one in the bottom, because I've just found that those two pieces, it works better to do it that way. Now you could mix this without the white. It's going to give you a transparent piece. And I want mine to be more opaque, so that's another reason we're using the white. If you were to swirl that in, you saw that on one of the checkerboard where we did the black. You totally can do it without the white, but it's not going to give you the effect that I'm looking for. So now, everywhere I put a drop of that color, I want to follow it with a drop of white. A drop, not so much. The white comes out really fast in these little dispensers they give you, so you have to be careful with it. But you'll see it starts to spread out on the top of the pink, and then in a second we're going to do the swirling effect. Now if you were just to leave this, what it will do is it'll start to push the pink down, and in a deeper mold you get an effect they call a petri dish. It's a very cool look, but I found in these little molds it doesn't work very good, so that's how I came up with this. So I use my tool you can find in the paper craft section usually, and it has balls on the end so that if you rub it into the mold it doesn't scratch or tear your mold. I like to use the big end when I'm doing this, and I just go down in and I just start to swirl it. I'm not trying to mix it completely, just swirling it, and I may pull it like up and out, but all it's doing is just kind of mixing that in a little bit with the resin that's already starting to set up, and it just, when it dries, it has that cool effect like the board itself has. So these pieces will match perfectly that way. And I just kind of dip in and out, and I am touching the mold. I'm not trying to mix the colors thoroughly though. I want to be able to see pink and I want to be able to see the white. So we're just gonna finish this off, and I just do the same for every piece, and you'll notice my resin is really starting to set up. It's really sticky. At this point it's still self-leveling, so if you pull it up out of the mold and do that, it'll level back out just fine. This almost looks like blown glass to me when it comes out. The other benefit to doing this is those little cracks and crevices in the bottom of the mold. This is getting those bubbles out that might cause you to have a bubble in a weird place. Because you're down there touching the mold, it'll pull a bubble out here and there, you'll see it. And that's one less bubble that you have in your piece. And remember, this stuff doesn't stay where you put it. So until it's really set up, it flows on its own. Gravity, air, a lot of things affect it. So you can make a cool pattern in it, but if you come back, 15-20 minutes, that pattern's probably going to be gone. I've found that if you go to a corner and you pull away from that corner, that wants to flow back into it, and so anywhere you want to make sure that it stays, pull away from that corner, and then as it flows back, it pushes the color back in. If you just like stir it in the middle, it won't flow out to the edges properly. And all of this I just figured out by playing with resin and color. So you guys might have cool techniques that that I haven't figured out yet. I'd love to hear about them. So either leave me links to videos if you've done them, or comment below and tell me how you do it. So we're just going to quickly get this finished, and that'll be the end of this video. You can always check my page at New to the Country Life on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and I post the finished products from the videos that we do. on those platforms. And you might even see the exact items for sale on my website occasionally. This is my favorite time to work with resin, is when it's starting to set up and it's gooey, because you can get it to do a lot more than you can when it's still very liquidy. It doesn't want to stay in any certain place or do what you want it to do. But this is better to me to work at this stage. You get a lot of cool effects if you can wait for it to set up a little bit and do a technique like this that resin that's setting up likes. Okay, so that's it for these. Thanks for watching. If you have questions or comments, leave them below. Feel free to always find me on Facebook on New to the Country Life and send me messages with questions. If you'd like to order any of the sets that we're showing today, just send me a message. Thanks.